So I probably need to put it on record straight at the beginning. In fact, I definitely need to put it on record straight at the beginning that you're a head teacher.
I'm a head teacher.
And that's terrifying for me. So more than anything photography related, that's terrifying.
Okay.
I was not a particularly well-behaved student.
Well, I wasn't particularly good at school.
Right.
In terms of behaviour. I was always the cheeky kid.
Right.
And they wouldn't even let me be a prefect at secondary school. So actually running the show now is quite an achievement.
Right.
Quite hilarious.
And you have to go, I don't want to go down the whole teaching thing because that's like, I'm like the antichrist of that stuff. But do you have to go through like being a teacher at a certain level and then being a certain year's teacher? And how do you build up to being a head teacher?
Oh, it's not time related. You do your time in the classroom.
Right.
I was a class teacher for 14, 15 years.
Right.
And I've now been a head for 17. Gosh.
So you've seen some transition though in the way like society works around how kids are brought up and
a little bit. I've never actually thought back on those things. I mean, there've been some things that have come in which have made a big difference, like mobile phones.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they've made a massive difference.
Yeah.
Things like when I started, I used to go home covered in chalk because I had a blackboard and pieces of chalk, and then it's a whiteboard, and now it's an interactive screen.
Are there no blackboards anymore?
No, blackboards are gone.
Mate, now I feel old.
But you might go down this retro route where you might get some teacher who uses film in his camera who wants a blackboard in his classroom.
He's got like the leather patches on a tweed?
They've got to have the leather patches, yeah. That would be the guy.
Right.
So a young fogey kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a weird thing, right? The young hipster thing now is to basically be an old person in a young person's body.
Yeah. And actually I don't do film because I remember film when I was younger and it was a pain in the arse.
Right.
And I didn't get into the darkroom stuff because I just knew that I'd end up buying all the kit and then not using it because it was just too much of a faff.
I think that there's a lot of people though now, I'm definitely aiming this kind of more at my generation, that we do a lot of claiming that we like stuff without actually engaging with it. So we should bring back film, but no one's actually, I don't know anybody my age who is actively working in a dark room at home.
I know people who do, but they're always at the beginning of the journey rather than totally immersed in it, and they're trying it out. And I get that, and that's fine. And I've quite, who am I to say don't use film? I just know personally, I wouldn't want the hassle of going through all of that again. You can use computer, use Lightroom or whatever software you're going to use, and you can do all of those things far easier, and you haven't got to wreck your bathroom. Yeah,
you haven't got to. I mean, it's kind of similar to having like a horse and cart, I guess, when we already know the car's pretty decent.
Yeah. But there is a thing that, if you shoot digital, you've got no soul kind of feeling. And I don't get that at all.
No.
I hope my pictures show some soul. And if they don't show some soul,
it's a Bob Dylan thing though, right? Bob Dylan walks on stage with an electric guitar and all of a sudden he's the devil.
Judas.
I think it's the same thing. It's like I was watching a review earlier for a Leica camera. It's a digital camera, has a film winder on the camera, but it's just a thumb rest. Yeah. It's just there for people that like that aesthetic.
Well, the X Pro 3 with the film slot at the back.
Yeah, I know that's controversial, but I actually quite like the hidden screen. I think that's quite a good idea. I like
that idea because how many shots do you lose by looking back at down at your viewfinder or chimping as you're going along?
Yeah. And I think as well, what we do far too often with cameras is we assume that they have to fill everyone's need for everything. And that's where I think a lot of manufacturers are going wrong.
Yeah.
In fact, I wrote a blog about the X Pro 3 and said the one mistake I think they made was putting video function in it. They should have just told video people to piss off. Mm. They've got enough cameras. Make that a street shooter's camera, and then it gives so much more sort of what in music you would call the clean headroom to the photo function. So it's not being buffered out by trying to cope with all these extra video features.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never shoot video. I'm not interested in shooting video. To me, it's a different skill set, a different art.
Yeah.
I'm not about that, but I think probably the X100 series are the ones where Fuji are really looking at the true street photography.
Yeah.
The X Pro range is great and is definitely aimed at street photographers as well, but it's perhaps got a little bit more to it with the video function.
Yeah. I just I like the sort of democratization of having decent video being available, because I think there are people that are obviously very artistic with different formats, but video for the longest time was very much a niche. You had to have a lot of money.
Sure.
So it's great that it's been democratized, but then the problem with it being democratized is that it's been democratized and there's a lot of shit that's come out of it, and lots of people that are just producing. I mean, I think probably one of the worst inventions for video has been like 120 slow-mo. Because if I have to watch one more video that is someone making like a coffee or, you know, picking up their keys to go out and it's all slow, it's Zack Snyder levels of who cares? Like, your film is 3 hours long and 90 minutes of it is just me being bored waiting for the arduous, boring task that you've put in slow-mo to make it cool happen.
We'll get into where you're going to start filming.
Yeah. I've noticed that the rise of the B-roll, like if you think of B-roll as just being fluff,
there's a lot of fluff.
There's not a lot of anything but
to get
fluff.
you to the 10 minutes or whatever it is you need to do to register,
which is I mean, maybe I'm just old now and maybe I'm missing the point, but that's not how they used to do it in my day, and damn it, they should do it the way I've always known it.
I mean, democracy is always a good thing, isn't it? And you get that with the iPhone or whatever phone that now has a fantastic camera in it. You know, they all have good cameras in now, and that's done huge amounts for democratizing photography, and particularly street photography. You know, everyone's now got a camera. It doesn't mean all of it's quality, and you've got to wade through so much more stuff to get to the nuggets, really, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, that when there's almost like a threshold you have to get through, I don't want to say financially, but financially, it means that the people that end up doing that medium, whatever it is, have had to really want to do it.
Yeah.
Because they've had to invest. Whereas when the threshold is so much lower, you're getting a lot of people in there that are just maybe just not really trying and throwing a lot of something at the wall and seeing what sticks, and maybe none of it's sticking. But one of the things I actually really liked, I read through some of your blogs, and you have a really important tip that I really, really think is understated.
You'll have to remind me.
Which is, you're talking about Instagram.
Yeah.
And it was about curating your feed.
Yeah.
Basically, don't let it fill up with nonsense and stuff that's just a waste of time. So you lose all the good stuff in the mix.
Yeah, and it's very difficult because, you know, you want to follow your wife and your friends and the dog and all of those things. But actually, as soon as you start following that, you start getting a load of stuff, you know, pictures of other people's meals or their holidays or you know, whatever appearing in your feed. And if that's fine if that's what you want, but maybe have a separate account for that and have another one which is pure weddings or street or landscape or whatever it is that you shoot.
Well, I now have 4.
Okay.
Which is
one for the dog.
I now have 5.
Excellent.
One for the dog, one for me personal, and then my wedding, my portrait, and now this new street city thing that I'm doing.
I have one, and it's almost pure street. There are a few friends on there that I follow.
Yeah.
I've thought about having a black and white feed and a color feed because I don't know whether you've noticed, but my feed alternates black and white and color.
Yeah. And your website has that as a pretty strong distinction as well.
Yeah. I think really because I've just never really felt that I've found a way of representing the two sitting happily together other than to alternate.
Right.
So I don't know whether it...
Do you find that you're sometimes in a color mood and you're sometimes in a black and white mood? Is it like down to how you feel?
No, it's down to what I posted yesterday. So if I posted colour yesterday, I'm post black and white today and colour tomorrow.
It's literally
alternating.
Right, okay.
And I think, you know, sometimes when I go and shoot, I will be in a colour mood or a black and white mood, or I will frame up to take a photo and I will envisage that it's going to be colour or black and white, one or the other when I finish with it. Sometimes I don't know. I always shoot raw, so I'm shooting in colour anyway, and then I will process it in black and white. But I don't process immediately. I take my pictures and I leave them for as long as I can. Okay. So I was out with a couple of friends, 3 friends, shooting in Shoreditch last Saturday, and I haven't even looked at what I've got yet because I know that there was some shots there that I took and I'm thinking, actually, I'm quite looking forward to seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I know that I will be too invested in making it work.
Right.
And I want to sit back and give it some distance. Yeah, I want to be a bit more objective about it because there's a phrase that writers use about killing your darlings.
Yeah.
So, you come up with a really superb idea and you work at it to make it the best it possibly can be. But the more time you spend on it, the worse you're making it. And actually what you really need to do is ditch it.
There's a fairly quick turnaround to regression from progression with anything creative. I've always had the, maybe doesn't apply so much to street, but I've always had the, something that I remember reading when I was a musician, which was about recording solos. Anytime you're recording anything that's kind of improvised, and it's improvised but being recorded.
Yeah.
So it's off the cuff, but at the same time, that's the one that whoever hears it is going to think was written for that particular point.
And the best possible version.
Yeah, exactly. And basically, it was a guitar player who I'm hugely in love with. And he said that if you record 100 times, if you record a solo 100 times and each time you're improvising, said you'll probably find number 6 or 7 was the one, because it's that perfect point between just tidying up the technicalities that weren't quite there on 1 or 2 or 3 when you were cold.
Yep.
And then everything after about 10 is just you getting flatter and flatter with emotion. And like, you're just kind of over criticizing and breaking down what you've done until it becomes a technical exercise as opposed to sort of like an expression. So I think, quite often with creativity, we do have a tendency to kind of way overanalyze, and then I guess to have that ability as well. I don't know how you have that ability to kind of put stuff away and not go straight to it. Like the fact that you have that restraint is pretty impressive.
I think having a full-time, very demanding and exhausting job helps with that, because I get home in the evening and I'm knackered and I think, leave it for today. But it is, I can't always do it. Sometimes I'm really excited, and especially when people I've been out with are posting their best 9 of the day or whatever it's going to be. The temptation to get yours up there or just to put something up there. Sometimes I'll drip feed 1 or 2 into the stories on Instagram, but they might be, untouched really. Just here are a few like notes, sketches.
Right. I see what you mean.
This is a little bit of what I was up to today, but I haven't polished it or honed it yet. And, then I come round to the processing part.
So did you go out with a group, did you say?
Last weekend was actually 3 female street photographers.
And is that common that you would go out and photograph street stuff in a group?
Increasingly so. I mean, I think the social side of Instagram has really facilitated that, and there have been people who've contacted me and said, "I really like your work. Do you fancy hooking up? Let's go for a beer. Let's go for a coffee. Do you want to do a podcast?" And then sometimes that's happened, and it's been good. I've met some really good street photographers, some people I hadn't met before, didn't know them online, but met them in the flesh and then started following them, and they're really good. And I think, no matter whether you've got 1 follower or 1,000,001, you always learn things from other people. Everybody sees things uniquely. And I think that's the beauty of it. The downside, I guess, is that I've got so many shots where you've got somebody else reappearing in the frame because they're a street photographer and they're walking by with their camera and they saw the same thing, and hey, there's their reflection, their shadow, their camera, whatever. So sometimes it is better to go on your own, and I'm, street photography is quite a solitary pastime, and I guess any kind of photography is fairly solitary.
What I would be curious of is if you're working in like a fairly busy space, I don't know actually, would it be maybe if you're working in a quiet space and there's like 3 or 4 photographers, does that draw more attention?
It can do. I mean, I went on a photo walk that Fuji, I think, organised probably 4 years ago. Kicking myself because I can't remember the guy's name. Matt. Anyway, he does a lot of he's a Fuji ambassador, does a lot of the Fuji walks. And we met at Tate Modern, and I'm not kidding, there must have been 80 people turn up, and he was there with his GoPro holding it up high for everyone to follow. And in terms of a photo walk, it was quite nice to see bits of London that I might not have known so well before. But in terms of what I got as street photography, it was nigh on useless, because it was like having a blues and twos firing and sirens going off and everything and saying, hey guys, here we come.
Yeah.
It wasn't subtle at all. So you do, I think if there are 2 or 3 of you, it's fine. And, what we all tend to find, I think, is that you can be in an area, you start shooting and you come back together every 10, 15 minutes and you have a look at what each other have got. And it's always amazing to see that you've got a completely different set of pictures and, somebody spotted somebody, someone else has got a kid, and you do see things differently. And some people shoot from a low angle and, get great shots with feet. I don't tend to do that, but
right.
So you look
You're
at
not
it
a shoot from the hip kind of.
I shoot a lot from the hip, actually. I very rarely bring the camera to my eye. And I'm probably almost too quick to do that sometimes. But I think initially, how come too quick, or how come I shoot from the hip? How come
you think you're too quick to do
it? Sometimes I think I'm not really engaging with what I'm doing. I'm almost doing it as a not quite scattergun because that's not what I mean. There are street photographers who switch their camera onto continuous shooting mode and will just spray.
Yeah.
I definitely don't do that, but I will walk up very close to somebody.
So you kind of want to be more engaged.
I think a lot of what I do is intuitive, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think you do develop a feel and you definitely develop an eye. And sometimes I've taken pictures and then it's only when I've got home and looked at them on the screen that I realised what I've got. And perhaps something that I hadn't realised was in shot and actually makes it better. And I never know whether that I actually saw it and was unconsciously aware of it, subconsciously aware of it, or whether I just didn't see it and got lucky. So I think initially I shot from the hip because it enabled me to pretend I wasn't really taking pictures. And I was a bit cowardly about it. It's a brave step going out and taking photographs of strangers, particularly when they are, particularly when your nose is within punching distance of their fist, kind of thing. Yeah. And I do get very close to people, as you can see from some of the shots I've got. I'm 3 feet away very often. Most people, when you're that close, don't actually believe you're taking their picture, so that's fine.
Yeah.
And you can, do all sorts of things like carry on holding the camera and looking down the street and looking at your watch, or pretending you're the lost tourist or whatever, or holding your phone to your ear so that you look like you're doing something else other than taking their picture. But yeah, I shoot a lot from the hip, but I think one of the things I would like to do is to slow down a bit more, bring the camera up to my eye and properly take my time to get the shot. Having said that, the sort of images that I take like that tend to be more sort of, figure in architecture, figure in geometry kind of images that you do see a lot of on Instagram, less of the sort of the more humanistic approach where you've caught a moment with, I don't know, a child jumping in a puddle or something.
Right. I wasn't aware coming in. When I came in and started sort of really looking at street photography, when I decided probably about 2 months ago that I was starting to look at doing a project with this, I didn't realize how much of a divide there was in the approach to street photography, because there's obviously some people that look for, like you'll get the advertising of someone's expression. Someone in an advertising will be expressing something, and then you get someone walk past it and they get that kind of like
the reaction,
funny reaction type shot, or the like coincidental. I think they'll get like. I saw one yesterday, and I really don't want to say it was one of yours because I don't think it was. I was at the camera club desperately trying to keep my attention. And it was a couple in an advertising poster, like hugging, but then underneath was a pregnant woman walking past. Right. And she was like looking up, not
that was mine.
That was okay, great. I think that was when we were messaging each other, and I was like, put my phone on as dim as possible.
I took that in Bologna in Italy.
Right.
And that's a perfect example, actually. I saw the picture and I wanted somebody coming past, but I didn't know who was going to come past.
Yeah. And you had to wait 9 months for someone pregnant.
Absolutely. 9 months. And yeah. I got lucky.
Yeah.
And it was a kind of what happens next kind of scenario, the couple hugging and then the woman underneath.
Is there a point when you're waiting that you just kind of go, that wasn't the one, but that's as close as I'm willing to put up with?
All the time. I mean, I think there are, like you say, there are very many different styles and ways of going about street photography, and certainly in terms of outcome, that's true. Whether you do something that's a funny juxtaposition with a poster or something that's a silhouette or, matching colours. But I think there are definitely two types of street photographer, and sometimes I'm a bit of both. But you've got your hunter who will go out and is moving about all the time looking for whatever it is they're going to catch, and then you've got your fisher who will find a place and wait and wait
That's
and wait.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and they will wait there until something takes the bait. So they might find a beautiful piece of light or a good frame, an arch or something, and they're waiting for someone to walk into the shot. Or you might get a yellow background and you want somebody coming through in a red hat. Okay, well, you might have to wait a long time for someone in a red hat. And if you're prepared to wait, I've known street photographers who've waited a couple of hours to get one image. Well, I can't do that. I'm too restless. No. I will wait probably 5 minutes, maybe 10, if I've got a really amazing spot.
All right, so let's go through, let's say this Sunday you're going to do some street photography.
Yep.
Your batteries, what camera are you using out of interest?
Fuji X-T3.
Okay, perfect. So your batteries are charged.
Doesn't last very long.
No, I know. Tell me about it.
My batteries are charged.
Yeah. Well, we're about to go Washington on Sunday, and I'm like, I'm gonna need about 6 batteries just to be safe, just in case.
Yeah.
Especially like Washington is probably going to be protests. So
I take hundreds of pictures. If I'm out for the day, I will probably take, and you'll be gobsmacked having come from a different genre. I could take 1,000 photos.
Right.
In a day. Probably 100 of those might be worth looking at twice. And of those, I might get 3, 4, 5 that I'm actually pleased with.
Right. Okay.
And then across a year, probably 3 or 4 that I'm really pleased with and will remember.
Yeah.
It's a tiny percentage of what I actually shoot.
Okay. Well, I mean, the thing is that it's worth the trouble, quote unquote, of taking those 1,000 if you're going to get 5.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I think people miss quite a lot, is that they think that every photo has to be the photo.
Yeah.
I find when I've sort of done coaching or I've had second shooters on weddings, that's one of the hardest things. It's like, there's a difference between the stuff you post online to get more bookings and the stuff that would mean a lot to the family. And then just general storytelling. Quite often you need connective frames when I do weddings. You need something that ties, okay, so this was where the reception was, and now they're heading in for the meal. So so you need some people looking at like their seating plan, some people heading in, looking at the stuff
telling
on the table.
Story.
Yeah, you need to tell the story. Where I'm struggling with street, and I've been out a handful of times, I mean maybe 6 or 7 at most, and the stuff that I've been posting is previous attempts, maybe not at street photography, but just at trying to not be me with a camera, because I have a particular style because of the stuff that I do day to day. And I wanted to get away from just photographing people that knew it was happening and away from weddings are a lot easier than people think because it's a pre-designed narrative. So you're expected to be taking photos. People are never as hostile as what's made out by wedding photographers. And it's quite easy to give yourself something to photograph at a wedding.
Yeah.
I go out onto a street and I'm just like, what the fuck am I supposed to be photographing?
Yeah. I mean, I think music is a very good analogy there, actually. I think your landscape photographer, your portrait photographer is very much the classical music. There is almost a set way to do it with very clear expectations. And you know that if you're going to, I don't know, Ben Nevis, or if you're going to take a picture of Trump, please don't, but
I was planning on it, but now you've brought it up, I won't.
You kind of know what you're going to get, and what you know what Ben Nevis is going to look like, you know what Trump's going to look like, or whoever it might be, and there are only so many ways you can shoot that. When you go out, that's your classical music to me. It's scripted, it's composed. You go and
so if I'm going to take a guess here, you're going to say street is jazz.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it totally is, because the better street photographers, it's not just taking anything. It's not just taking a photograph of somebody walking along a street, because that's just blowing the noise down a trumpet and nobody wants to listen to that. Mm-hmm. So you skill up, you get your chops, You learn how your camera works. You know whether you want everything to be crystal clear or whether you want to shoot wide open and have a nice soft background or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's going to appear to any scene, so that appeal in the best thing in any scene. So you've got those tools so you can react quickly to what's happening in front of you, but you're improvising all the time. You're going along. You don't know what's coming around the corner.
Yeah.
When I get up and go off to London on the train, I'm sitting there on the train thinking, oh, no idea what I'm going to get today. Don't even necessarily have a plan of where I'm going to go.
Okay.
And one of the advantages of going with another group of people is that you get introduced to places that they know well and you perhaps don't, and you see things with fresh eyes, which is also always really good. I don't like shooting where I live, because everybody knows me because I've taught them and their parents and soon their grandparents probably. So I don't want to be there. But also I think it gets too familiar. It's good to go somewhere where you're a little bit remote, a little bit more objective. London's great because there are so many people with cameras that actually you merge into the background anyway. Yeah. And, you can always look like you're taking photographs of whatever, the red phone box or the bus or the taxi.
I'll tell you one thing I found come really in handy is Ishnish, Spraken Sie Englanderin. When someone's like, are you taking a picture of me? And you just say Ishnish, Spraken Sie Englanderin. They're like, oh, he doesn't speak English.
It's brilliant.
Just some dickhead tourist. We don't have to. He's not a threat. It's fine.
Yeah. I've got friends who are from Singapore and they do exactly that. They grew up in London, but they look Asian.
Right.
And everyone just assumes they're a tourist and don't confront them.
Yeah.
And I think, in the days when I had a shaved head, it was easier as well because people didn't want to ask me.
Yeah. I have to admit, one thing that I have definitely noticed is that I am not particularly inconspicuous when I've gone out, and I'm trying to think of ways I can kind of soften it down. Like I think I need to get a pair of glasses or something where
hat's good.
I don't look quite so much like I have heroin on me. Would be a good idea.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good point. And, I don't naturally dress down. I like to wear something that's a little bit, bit more than your M&S, what have you. So I'm used to sort of thinking about what I'm wearing and almost making a statement, I suppose, with the way that I want to dress. But if I'm going to do street photography,
you have some nice hats in reflections.
I have got some nice hats. Yeah. If I'm going to go off and do street photography, though, I don't want to draw attention to myself, so I will dress dark and hold my camera close to my chest.
Yeah.
And it's almost, it's almost a disguise. I do wear a hat, and I don't know why. I think it's a kind of confidence thing, actually.
Right.
I either wear a hat or a cap, and I think I take on a persona.
Okay.
Different person.
I can understand that completely. I have a game prep for weddings. I have like a shirt. It's like my wedding shirt. And
you have a process you go through to get yourself in that place to shoot.
It goes back to when I used to play hockey, and it was like Sunday you've got a game, Saturday night I was there doing stretches and taping the stick and stuff that was completely irrelevant, but made me get in the right mindset to then actually feel like I was going to do a better job.
Yeah. I've got music I listen to when I'm going to take photos on the train. Mm-hmm. I can't listen to music when I'm shooting.
Right.
But I've got music
because you're listening
to
out
on
for,
the journey.
For stuff that's going on? Or?
Yeah. I want to have all my senses tuned in.
Yeah.
I do listen to a lot of jazz, coincidentally, but I want to pump myself up when I'm going out taking photos because it's a little bit like it can be confrontational. It rarely is, but there is that expectation, and I want to go out there and be. And there are a lot of street photographers that talk about engaging with the people they're taking photos of and smiling and looking at them and almost
breaking the fourth wall.
Breaking the fourth wall, and I don't want to do that. I'm the opposite, actually. I want to be distant and remote, and if I get spotted, I just want to not run off, but melt away quickly.
Well, I haven't been doing it long enough,
which is a little bit sneaky, and I don't like that side of it. But I don't want to be noticed, and similarly, I listen to music that makes me feel that I'm in charge and I'm in control, and I'm going to do this kind of thing.
Do you go out with a preset idea of maybe not like you don't know where you're going or anything, but do you have? So one thing I've noticed with your work, and it's quite a common theme. With there's like a particular sort of avenue for this with street photography is that like the narratives in the color.
Yeah.
And I think with your work, there's a few photographers that jump out to me, but with your work, I definitely see every color image seems to be quite deliberately in color. There doesn't seem to be an image where it's in color coincidentally, although you couldn't find a reason other than it's in color. Like there always seems to be some kind of compositional reason for it to be in color.
That's interesting. I think probably I do make a very definite decision between black and white and color when I get to the processing stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I didn't know that it was definitely in color or definitely in black and white, it probably would be a shot that didn't work.
Oh, okay.
It's possibly. I'm just guessing. I'm not sure, but I think color's something I've had to learn. It wasn't something that I naturally got.
Mm-hmm.
My wife will tell you, she used to laugh at some of the color combinations I used to kind of put together when we were younger. And I've had to sort of intuitively learn, or not intuitively learn. I've actually had to teach myself which colors complement and which clash.
Yeah.
So I haven't always found color easy. I'm not colorblind or anything. I'm just ignorant.
Right.
And when it's come to processing, I'm very conscious that I used to really over process. I think a lot of people do when they're starting out, and you suddenly realize, you've got the raw image and you can do all these incredible things with it, but it's very easy to spend too long doing that and make a complete mess of it. And I found for a long time that actually my black and whites were more successful, probably because I wasn't oversaturating or that sort of thing. But I think probably if it's not definitely color or not black and white, it probably hasn't worked.
That's a good way of looking at it. I mean, I think sort of contrary to the current, I don't want to say witch hunt, but there seems to be a bit of an agenda against men at the moment, where it's sort of okay to just
street photography or
in life. I think it's just okay to just kind of shit on someone for being a bloke or
okay.
I
think it's probably about time, really. We've had it pretty good for
quite possibly. I haven't. I'm 31, so I don't have the benefit of anything that's happened before. But I think from what I see, I'm painfully analytical of other people. I tend to really want to work out a lot from people without asking them. I want to learn as much as I can without being helped.
Perfect street photographer.
Well, yeah, I just have to get the photography side of it together. But I think men are much more, they're much better at casting away information that isn't necessary.
Okay.
So they're very, very efficient with what they retain. And I think sometimes that comes across as being like uncaring or not listening or whatever. But I think sometimes it's got to be a product of evolution. Men are better at only retaining generally the vital stuff, and all of the superfluous stuff just disappears. And I see with wedding photography, like female wedding photographers are amazing at picking up on bizarre information and details over the course of a day. And a lot of male aren't. They're very good at structural way of photographing a wedding day, like a very structural kind of timeline way of doing it. It's the way I do it. It's very timeline based. Whereas I can think of a few friends of mine who do wedding photography, and the female ones are the ones that can almost, it feels like a fluid day.
Yeah.
And I think like with color, I mean, why would you need to retain complementary color until you actively teach it to yourself or you actively force yourself to retain it? Of course it's going to go past you because we don't have a need for it. That's the one thing I would say. Like,
could well be.
I'm always amazed by, one thing I actually want to ask you is when you get those situations where you have, like you said about like there's a yellow door, I think you said, and then you're waiting for a red hat or something to that extent. Yeah. Do you ever just get the urge just be like, it was a green hat, I'm just changing it in Photoshop?
No. And I can't use Photoshop.
Right.
I'm just not skilled enough.
Right.
I mean, there are so many things with my website and Lightroom, or, it is Lightroom that I use. There are so many things about processing and about having a web presence and a blog that I just wish I had more time to get my head around, and I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
Photoshop is one of those things that I've promised myself for probably about 5 years now that I'm going to sit down. I'm going to spend, I don't know, a weekend, a week, whatever, even do some online courses, whatever, but really get to grips with it. And I probably just don't need it enough.
Right.
Actually, I think the thing with street photography there are so many rules, for want of a better phrase, but I don't really mean rules. If I changed the hat into the red hat that I wanted, let's say it's a yellow wall and somebody walks by in a yellow hat and you can't see the hat, but I could change the hat to red in Photoshop, it would just feel like cheating. I don't want to do that. I mean, to me, I don't, that would be, if you go back to the fishing analogy, that would be like chucking a box of fish fingers in the river and reeling them in. I don't,
probably
what's
something
the point?
you see happening in Basingstoke.
Might well be. It goes against the code.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a gazillion different street photography codes. Don't crop. Well, that's not something I adhere to because I get irritated if something isn't straight. So, say what you like about me, but it bothers me. I always try and
why do you think you can't
level
crop?
It up?
What's the purpose of saying don't crop?
Oh, I mean, it goes back to people like Cartier-Bresson, who was really the father of street photography. And that kind of idea that you are completely true to what you see. You don't crop, you don't take anything out of the image. If there's a Coke can in the foreground and it just happens to be there, you leave it there. And in the same way, you don't disturb it on the street. You don't kick it down the street and then take a photograph.
Possibly ruled out the idea, though, that maybe Henry Cartier-Bresson just wasn't very good at Photoshop?
I'm sure he wasn't. But I don't adhere to that. I think if you want to crop, you want to crop. And,
who's to know anyway?
Yeah,
I don't know. And maybe I'm missing it.
But also, if you took 6 feet further and went closer in, that's effectively cropping anyway. You just didn't at the time. You shot from where you were. So, there are all those rules. But I would draw the line at altering. I would never take something out. I would never use the. Can't even think of the name of the tool now, but where you erase
like spot heal.
Yeah, I would use it to get marks off the lens cleaned up. But I wouldn't take out, I don't know, a telephone line or a Coke can or something like that. If it was in the image, it stays in the image.
Yeah. If
the hat's red, it stays red.
Yeah.
And if it's a yellow hat against a yellow door, I either wait for a red hat or I go off and do something else.
So this is one that's just popped into my head and I cannot for the life of me think what I would have done. But it was a thing when I got into photography. So I started photography about 7 years ago. And I noticed a lot of like the online forums that had street photographers in. It was like, got to have a picture of a homeless person.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on stuff like that? Do you think that's a bit...
I've got mixed feelings. I think I actually even wrote wrote a blog about it.
A really posh blog is a blog.
A really posh blog, yeah. I can think of 2 photographs of homeless people I've taken. One was by mistake and one was deliberate. I say by mistake. It was Christmas Eve. I was burst into the pogues here.
Right.
It was Christmas Eve on Oxford Circus, and there was a guy slumped with a great long beard, and he just looked a little bit like Father Christmas.
Right.
I didn't know whether he was drunk, homeless, or whatever. And before I'd even thought I probably shouldn't take that, I'd taken it.
Yeah.
And then there was another time there was a guy with a Superman vest on, who was homeless and clearly a big character, and he was sort of playing up to everybody. And I took a picture of him. I think generally my feeling is that you don't take a picture of somebody in a shitty position. You don't want, if it was your son or if it was you, would you want that photograph to be taken? And if I feel that if that's the case, then don't take it.
Yeah.
But there's another side of me. I've always loved history, and there's another side of me that thinks, we shouldn't be airbrushing these people out of history. They are real. They are a statement about life today in London or Birmingham or Manchester, whichever city you're in.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't pretend they're there.
So it's kind of more a case of maybe photographing them in more of a sympathetic light than not photographing them.
I don't photograph them because I don't want to abuse their position or embarrass them or make a thing of them. But I do sometimes stop and talk to them. Yeah. And in that case, I haven't done this, but I can imagine a situation where I might stop and talk to them and then perhaps take their photograph. But I don't tend to do portrait photography as such, I wouldn't ask somebody on the street, can I take your photograph?
No.
My shots are all candid. The only thing I could imagine doing was if I was going to do a series perhaps on homeless people, I would, in that case, I would engage with them, maybe ask to take their photograph, take them for a coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
But generally I would avoid photographing homeless people.
It's just something that I remember being like a big thing. Like right now, the thing is weird taking pictures of Sony's in someone's hand super close up with a wide angle at 1.4. That's like I cannot imagine why anyone cares, but that's the thing.
And a lot of people say you shouldn't, don't take photographs of people on their mobile phones.
Right.
And I don't get that because
it rules out 90%
how do you
of the
avoid
population?
them for a start? Yeah, exactly. But also, I mean, it's so much a thing of today.
Mm-hmm.
And what, I do think one of the jobs of a street photographer is to capture the times that we're in.
Yeah, and it's a big part of the narrative of this day and age. Like,
it's a massive part of the narrative. People
it comes into weddings a lot, and like people just. I mean, my personal ironic favorite is an iPad. When someone's gone to the effort of bringing a screen with them out as a camera, that's fantastic to me.
Yeah, brilliant. And you get a nice glow back on the face very often from people on the phone, and especially in low light shooting. That's great having that.
Yeah.
So no, I'm all for shooting people using mobile phones, and I don't really understand why you shouldn't. I think possibly the argument is that, if they're engaged on the phone and they're busy in a heavy conversation, you don't know what they're talking about. They don't know you're potentially taking their image, so therefore you shouldn't take it. Well, most people whose photographs I take have got no idea I'm taking their photograph.
Yeah. And to me, I would have thought the one objection maybe I don't agree with, but I could definitely see is that I see a lot of street photography. I think the reason a lot of street photographers, I'm probably aiming more at Americans here, like to go to impoverished places to do street photography is because it looks retro.
Yeah.
Like people love going to like the poor side of Japan or the poor side of China, poor side of India and photographing it. And then they don't have to worry about technology ruining
poverty tourism.
Yeah. And it's like, it's got that cool retro feel, even though it's like when you really start thinking about what's gone in to get that cool retro feel, it's a bit dark. But I think it's a lot of it's like trying to have a nostalgic feel to an image and make it timeless by removing what we know now.
Sure.
But I think in 20 years' time, pictures of people with phone stands is going to be quite funny.
Absolutely, because in 20 years' time, we'll probably be communicating through some
telepathy.
Yeah, some chip implanted in our ears or something.
Yeah.
And people holding phones will look hilarious in the same way as we look back at those massive bricks from 30 years ago. Well, you don't remember them, but,
I've heard stories.
People carrying around something half the size of their briefcase and shouting in it on a street corner. Those look hilarious now.
Well, I remember my dad telling me a story about going to the pub with his brother and a couple of friends, I think. And his brother had just gotten one of the ones that had like the big carry battery and the phone separate.
Yep.
And the whole time they were out of the pub, he was making phone calls. And I think
because he could,
according to my dad's story, I think he ended up either breaking the phone or really just kicking off about like, if you want to make a phone call, go home. You shouldn't be on your phone when you're out with your friends. I think, wow, what a way to think about things now, like so many years on. And now you can go out to a pub and go and have a look. You could go to a silent pub these days because people are just in there.
Some pubs have banned them, which I think is not a bad thing. Really.
Yeah.
But, I've got photos all the time of couples who are obviously intimate, very close together on trains, buses, escalators, really close to each other, wrapped around each other, hugging each other, embracing, but they're all on their phones.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's great.
Yeah.
I love that. It's so bizarre.
Yeah. It's from a narrative point of view, like the more you scratch it, the wilder it gets. And it's crazy. So let's talk about camera stuff. Let's talk about camera gear. It's not really my wheelhouse. I find the majority, I'll tell you one thing I've noticed. I do what everyone does when they get into photography, and I'm starting something new. I'm starting a new sort of genre. Start looking at YouTube.
Sure.
And if you put anything in to do with street photography, you get two types of videos. The first is here's me with a GoPro taking pictures on the street. And the second is, what settings should you use for street photography? Which is a bizarre, because surely it depends where you are, the light you have available. I've never really understood that what settings should I use.
I think the settings issue is actually a bigger deal because you don't have time.
Yeah.
You know, you've often taken the photograph before you've really thought about what you're taking a photograph of. And if you could spend the time that a landscape photographer was taking to frame the shot, the person would have gone minutes before you were ready to take the shot. So it's good to have go-to settings. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't shift them about and change them.
Yeah.
But for me, I generally like to freeze motion. Okay, sometimes I deliberately want something that's blurred and I'll go down to 30th of a second or whatever it is. But generally I want to freeze people so that the frame is sharp. So I tend to shoot at 1/500th.
Right.
After that, I need to make sure I've got enough light. So I will tend to go shoot probably in a sort of, I don't know, f4. I don't usually go to f8 because I'm not so interested in everything being crystal sharp in the background.
Yeah.
And sometimes I like things to be a lot softer, and, you know, especially if it's an individual, I'll shoot wide open, especially if it's at night when I need the light.
You kind of have to, yeah.
So I think the settings are important, and, you know, I shoot with a 23mm lens, 35mm equivalent. And if it's nighttime shooting, I'll stick it on high ISO. Some people say ISO. I say ISO. That's cool, the whole thing off.
Yeah. It's like it's like the bokeh debate.
Yeah.
How do you say bokeh?
Blur.
Yeah. The squidgy bit.
I know.
Next to the thing you were taking a picture
that
of.
Japanese squidgy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you should Google that, but.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
No. It's a family show.
No, I think like the one thing I'd say with street photography compared to almost any other type of photography, and this is coming from a complete amateur, but surely your first thing you should be focusing on if you're thinking about doing street photography is just like, what are you trying to do? Like, what is it that you want to do? Do you want to have pictures of people? Do you want to have them aware of you? Do you want them to break the fourth wall? Do you want to be kind of covert about it?
Yeah.
The settings, to me, it's like when I'll get messages off of people who want to do wedding photography, and usually it's either they don't even like say hello, which is just a great way to start approaching someone if they're willing to cut off a chunk of their business and give it to you.
Yeah.
But they'll say, what camera do you use? It's like, does not matter.
Absolutely doesn't.
Absolutely irrelevant.
No.
And then it's like, one of the questions I've actually had more often than is really even, it can drive you a bit mad when you think about it, is what settings do you use for a wedding? And my dad would say, how long is a bit of string?
That's a really crazy question.
Yeah, like which part
wedding?
of the day?
Yeah, exactly.
Where am I? What time of year is it?
Yeah. I mean, the same thing does apply to street photography. But, you know, I mean, settings, for me, I shoot with a 23mm lens because that seems to be the one I'm happiest with. And I've tried all sorts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't, partly because I want to shoot with a small discrete lens. I don't want to drag a great big 400mm.
Are you on the f2? Out of interest, is it the 23 f2?
The 1.4.
Okay.
I don't want to take a 400mm lens down with me because I don't want to carry that about. Yeah. It's impractical. It actually, when you're shooting somebody from 50 yards away to get a close up of them, that does feel a little bit creepy and a little bit stalkerish.
Yeah, I'm
not interested in doing that. You know, I think if somebody catches me and says, you've just taken my photograph and I'm within speaking distance of them, then fair game. Yeah, I did. And I took it because actually I think you look great, or that's an amazing hat, or, you know, what a brilliant expression, or it was a perfect moment. You were just lighting your cigarette, whatever it was. I'm happy to explain it. And if they punch me, they punch me. They haven't yet. But I don't want to wander around with a massive lens, and 23mm seems to work for me. It's 35mm equivalent.
I've actually said for the longest time, if you want to learn photography, like the quickest way, as the crow flies, the fastest way to be really comfortable with a camera is you put a 35mm equivalent on a camera, and everything you photograph, you try and do it in 5 frames, not one. You try and do it in 5.
Right.
So someone making a coffee seems to be a fucking thing. Everyone has to photograph or film or whatever, but someone making a coffee,
in 5 frames.
Tell me the story in 5 frames. I want like a close up of something that's like an interesting way of, an interesting perspective on something that we see in a different way. But I also need the narrative. I need the different angles. It makes you work so much harder. People hide so hard behind like long, I'm a portrait photographer that does a lot of long lens, wide open stuff.
Yep.
But they hide so much behind just blowing out backgrounds, and therefore it must be a good photo.
But you won't usually get the luxury of 5 frames when you take a street photography.
No, that's slightly different. I think street photography, like I wouldn't be, if I was starting photography, it's kind of this doesn't really make sense the way I'm going to say it, but knowing what I know now, if I was to start photography, I wouldn't start with street. I think street photography is something that you kind of need another idea before you go into street photography.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think it is demanding and challenging because it's so fast, and you've got to know your way around the camera. But that doesn't mean you can't start there. And actually, you could start with an iPhone or a phone. Other phones are available, folks.
Yeah.
You could start with your phone.
Yeah.
Whatever, the best camera is the one you've got with you, as somebody famously once said 1,000,000 times.
I think Chase Jarvis made the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure
a lot of money out of that
and
quote.
he's right. If you haven't got a camera, you're not going to get the picture. But if you've got a phone with you and you can take that picture, then take it and cut your chops that way, learn that way. For me, small lens, the 23mm, 35mm equivalent is apparently roughly what the eye sees anyway. So
it's about, I think the eye is like 42.
So,
but like I found myself the other day doing this where I was like trying to look forwards and work out how wide I was seeing. But then every time you try and see how wide you're seeing, you start moving your eyes. And then I realized I was in public and I just looked like an absolute mentor and I needed to be a bit more discreet.
I'm a photographer.
Yeah. Just stood there holding a camera in Borough Market, just looking out the side of your eye. It's not a particularly clever thing.
Yeah.
No, I think like when it comes to learning photography, I think the two things you can do the two things everyone should be doing is review and replicate. So when something works, review why it worked and then try and replicate the scenario in which it happened, and then you develop style.
Yeah.
Whereas like as an overall sort of like an ethos for photography, I think any creativity, you have to have two things. One is a clear direction. Like you have to have some idea of like have a taste, develop a taste.
Yeah.
Like find someone whose work you like and just aim in that direction. And the second thing is you just have to have blind self-hatred. Like it's so helpful to not love your own work.
Yeah.
So the people that I know that are so in love with their own work, they have not moved in 5 years. It's just the same stuff.
I think that's very true. And we're not starting from a blank canvas every time. We're not starting from nowhere. There are people who were taking street photographs long before we were born.
Yeah.
And presumably if you want to go out and take street, it's because you've seen images that other people have taken and thought, actually, hey, that's a thing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that there was that vast back catalogue of street photography out there. I didn't realize street photography was a thing. I went out with a couple of mates who had got me in, persuaded me to buy a camera, really. I was shooting things with my phone, anything and everything. And one of my friends said, well, let's go out. I bought a Fuji bridge camera. And we went out and we took some landscape shots and things. And I thought, that's all right, but it's a bit boring. I don't really, landscapes don't really do anything for me. So we then decided we were going to do the Monopoly board in London. And we would go to, say, Liverpool Street and take some photos around the station. Or we would go to Mayfair and take some photos around Mayfair. And we didn't really have anywhere to display this or to do anything with it. We thought about maybe we should do the colours of the board under the photos, but we never did. Right. We just had a few really good days out with a few pies and pints at lunchtime and good crack.
Yeah.
But it was on one of those occasions when we were up in just north of Soho, somewhere just north of Oxford Street, and I saw a woman bend over on the other side of the road outside a barber's shop that had a picture of a frog lifting off a top hat. And I timed the photograph so it looked like the woman was wearing the top hat.
Right.
And it was rubbish actually. She was blurred and the timing was off.
Right.
But something clicked inside and I thought that's quite funny. I could see if I can get some shots like that. And then that was the first time I thought actually taking pictures of people and making something humorous or juxtaposing something, there's something in that. And then I started looking around and of course discovered that there were hundreds, millions, thousands. And the numbers go the other way around, don't they? Hundreds, thousands, millions.
Well,
remind me.
There's hundreds of thousands of millions of everything, unfortunately. Yeah, that's the scary thing with the
photographs
internet.
out there. So, that was when I realized actually this is a thing and it's something that excites me. It is it's a real adrenaline rush for me in a way that I can't imagine being excited about a landscape or a macro photography.
Right.
Or, I don't know what I'm going to get. I've got the free song, if you like, of not knowing whether someone's going to be A, notice me, B, be against me, C, be supportive. You just never know. And they're all fleeting moments. And you turn a corner and there's something happening or not happening, or the sun's shifted, or there's a hilarious poster, or you just never know what you're going to get.
You get chaos theory and something just throws itself up that you didn't even see coming.
Yeah. And that's a huge rush. I love it.
Do you give yourself like projects where
I'm not good at that?
Right. Okay.
I think because the nature of the way I work is so random, I don't even really know where I'm going when I sit out, and I follow my nose, or I follow the light, or I follow somebody in a hat, or somebody with an umbrella, or whatever it might be. And then
this is why I couldn't do it. And then if I followed someone in a hat, I would just end up getting arrested for following someone in a hat.
And then they turn into a shop, and then you find somebody else, or you go back the way and that is, I meander.
Yeah,
a lot, and I'll pause for a bit, and I'll go for a coffee, and I'll take photos and out of the window of the coffee shop or whatever, and I never really know where I'm going. There are things that I know appeal to me, and I'm building up quite a collection of images that have got Coca-Cola somewhere in them.
It's better than Pepsi,
a logo, absolutely.
Yeah,
or just the red from the reflection in Piccadilly Circus, and I've thought maybe over time I'd build up a collection of those, but I haven't gone looking for them.
So there's when I do portrait stuff, I hit a wall really hard with portraits about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And what it was, I thought it was that I was becoming like a bit creatively empty, and I needed to keep finding like ways to trick myself into enjoying it. So I came up with all of these little projects, and I would have I restrict myself to this piece of equipment, or I would have to shoot in this certain lighting setup or whatever. I would repeat a process, and it would be a series. And that worked really well for an extremely short amount of time. And I would keep coming back to this feeling of And what I realized was actually some of the people I was working with were just exhausting me.
Yeah.
And that I wasn't enjoying the process of working with certain people. And it's not like their fault, or it's not my fault. It's just sometimes you have two different types of personality and they clash. And what we ended up with, we might both have liked, but to get there was a battle.
Yeah.
And I now think like photo projects are so important to kind of fight through not enjoying something. But I've had to, like you were saying about how you have to sort of teach yourself to stop doing something.
Yeah.
I've had to teach myself to stop thinking that when I hit a rough patch, the immediate thing I should do is steer into it. Sometimes maybe it's directing me away from the thing that I'm not enjoying.
I think everybody who is creative does hit a rough patch or a barren spell or whatever you want to call it, writer's block. And I think very often the way is just to shoot through it, though, to be honest.
Right.
And if, I sometimes come back and I think, I've wasted my time. I've got absolutely nothing. And when I do look at the images, however much later it is, there might be one or two things that I'd forgotten about or are better than I'd at first hoped. Mm-hmm. Almost every single time I come back from a photo walk, I sit down and I look at the images. When I sit down and look at the images, I think, well, I've shot hundreds and actually they're mostly rubbish.
Right.
And I don't delete much, but I tend to save shots, even shots I don't particularly like. I will save them just because I've got the record. But if it's ridiculously blurred or I've missed the person completely, I'll delete it to save a bit of space. Mm-hmm. But it can be quite soul destroying because you think, that's 90% of what you shoot is crap. And I know Martin Parr says shoot more crap as the way to get better. And he's right in many ways, because the more you shoot, the better you're going to get.
Yeah.
But, going back to projects, I think it's important if you are going to shoot a project, you're shooting something that you're passionate about or at least interested in. And I suppose on my website, I've got a couple of things. One was a day at Notting Hill Carnival. And not that I'm passionate about Notting Hill Carnival, but I knew that it was going to be really rich and vibrant and a street photographer's dream in many ways. In some ways, it was actually almost too much because there was where do you start? It was needles and haystacks, and there was just so much going on.
I suppose as well, when you're attuned to kind of trying to find something and then something's everywhere, it's really hard to then narrow down what's important.
The other thing I tried to do was a football match, not the game itself, but the crowd beforehand. And I happened to be in London when United were playing Chelsea.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, I'll wander down Stamford Bridge. It's an area I know reasonably well. And I just walked about and watched the crowds coming and going before the game and tried to get a bit of the atmosphere. And to be honest, I didn't find it as fulfilling. It just seemed, I suppose there's a difference between street photography and documentary photography, and it was verging on the documentary photography. And I lost some of the edge of the street, I think, somehow. Right. But they were okay.
We had, so we've done 3 podcasts this week, which is crazy. Wow. We don't normally we get a lot of kickbacks on doing them because people think it's either a video and they don't want to have to do their makeup to talk about stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't do video.
I did my wake up for nothing.
Well, you're looking a lot better than I am. So I have to say, I feel like I really underdressed for this.
It's age and experience.
Yeah, you're showing it for definite. I have to ask 2 questions that I think I would be really pissed off if I didn't ask you.
Okay.
So the first one, and there might be questions within this, I do apologize, but the first one is, where is your favorite place to photograph?
Oh, wow. I think to some extent it depends on the time of day.
Mm-hmm.
I love Soho at night.
Right.
I love Soho, actually. If I could only ever shoot one place again, I'd, for the rest of my days.
Yep.
If I had to stick to a boundary, if I got some kind of tag on my foot and I wasn't allowed anywhere else,
yep,
I'd probably say Soho.
Yeah.
Whatever the weather, whatever the time of day, it's just fascinating. And I always seem to find new places, little alleyways and things. And it changes so much as well. The signage changes, the shops change, and the people are constantly changing. So yeah, it's vibrant. It's great.
Okay. And my second question is, I always want to put in like a 1A in there and just ask where your least favorite place is.
Least favorite.
Have you ever had is there somewhere you've gone to and you just had no success repeatedly, or it just hasn't done it for you?
There are, like I said earlier, I find it really hard shooting in my own. I live in a small village, and I find it really hard shooting there. And in fact, although I nearly always take my camera with me wherever I go, if I'm going down to the village shop, I have to remind myself. And I've got very few photographs that I've taken at home, as it were. But having said that, a year and a half ago, the village fete was on the Sunday afternoon, and it was one of those, small Surrey village fete, duck pond, lovely old pub, beautiful church.
I always think of the Father Ted, the village fair, where it's like the tunnel of goats.
Exactly that kind of thing, the strange tunnels made of hay bales that children go in and scream.
Yeah, you throw stuff at a coconut for some reason,
and there are about 7 people there.
Yep.
Anyway, I went down and took the camera and just happened to see this, what I think was a granddad, sitting on his own in a marquee with a rows of chairs, and he was right at the back row, looking thoroughly cheesed off, but holding a helium-filled balloon, which he was saving from floating away, which he obviously saved for one of the grandchildren who was going to come back and rescue him at some point. And I took the shot, and it got me into the British Photography Awards finals. So,
wow.
I would say it's probably my least favorite place to shoot, but possibly has been my most successful photograph.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. All right, so anywhere in the world that you haven't photographed that you really wish you could go to?
I'm not a huge travel fan, but I love cities. And I think if I was going to go, if you were going to give me a ticket now as my reward for doing the podcast, I'd love to shoot. I've been to New York a few times, but not as a street photographer.
Yeah.
I'd love to shoot New York in the snow.
Yeah. Well, we're going on the 1st of February, so I've got my fingers crossed that we're going to get.
When you say we're going, do you mean you and me?
Yeah, I'll tell Jamila she's not coming. You can come instead.
She wouldn't like it.
Yeah, no. She's been.
Yeah. So New York in the snow would be fab. I love shooting in Paris, although I think French laws are a little bit against street photography.
Yeah. They've gone a bit Hungarian with it.
They have. But the irony isn't lost on me because Paris is very much the birthplace of street photography.
Yeah.
But I love Paris and it's just a beautiful place to shoot. But London's fantastic. So
I'm struggling with London, if I'm honest. I think I'm very much an American soul, and I not to sort of develop how many people are in England now, like 67 million or something. Not to develop
that many.
It is getting pretty high up there.
Crept up while I was asleep.
Well, people do a lot of stuff overnight.
Yeah, that's true.
not to put a load of English people against me here or anything, but I much prefer America. I much prefer being in America. Like, I just feel like street signs don't annoy me in America because they're American signs, whereas the ones in England are just ugly. And the cars, because they're not what I'm used to. Like, cars is a real thing for me. I found with weddings, I can't have cars anywhere near photos unless they absolutely have to be, because I think firstly they date it, but they also add like a financial discrimination to a photo. Yeah, if you have like a Clio in the background, people make judgments on what's gone on there. I can't explain it.
But I think the dating part of it is important, isn't it? You know, in 30 years' time, you'll look back and go, "Oh, what a fantastic car." You probably wish it was in the photo.
Not with wedding photos. I'm trying to avoid that with I don't want it to be like really obviously dated. I want it to I want the people to date it and the look of the people more than
the vehicle.
Yeah. I don't know how to explain it.
I mean, I can see what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree, but mine's gone blank. Terrible.
Well, I really want to go Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago would be good. I'd like to go to Tokyo.
Yeah, one thing I would struggle with is just like, how do I get food? Yeah. Because I cannot even begin to understand how I would communicate with people there.
Point to your mouth and grunt. But going back to what you were saying a minute ago about cars and signs and things, and you know, the passion for American signs and American cars, they feel the same for, you know, the red pillar boxes and the red phone boxes and the taxis and things. And I think embrace it. You know, London's got all those iconic things that I think I'm going to have to train
myself to embrace it.
I like the idea of getting street shots of people with something which resonates London in the background. So, you know, an out of focus Big Ben or
just a Shard or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that, which gives it a sense of place so that you know that it was London.
Yeah. I think I've got obviously got a lot of learning to do, but I've got to learn to like London a lot more than I currently do. It's not like I don't like London. I love going there, but just photographing it. If you said to me, I could spend 3 weeks where I just had to ride trains in New York and just going back and forth on the subway and photograph, I'd be like, yep, I'm fine with that because there's so much interest. And then I go to London and I'm just like,
but I shoot loads on the tube and in stations and escalators. I've got so many shots on escalators that work.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about escalators is it's a little bit, you won't remember the Generation Game, but it was a TV program with a conveyor belt.
Your prize comes through, right?
Yeah, and the prize is not just your prize, but a whole series of
prizes.
You
had to like remember the order?
Your eyes. Yeah.
Is that right?
Well, that's what an escalator's like, isn't it? So you don't have to remember the people. You just stand there.
Yeah.
And as a street photographer, 1, 2, 3 people at a time pass
you find
before
yourself
your
going
eyes,
up and down and up and down to kind of wait for the moment.
I haven't actually done that, but you could.
Right.
But the tube as well, you know, you stand on the platform and your next set of subjects appears every 30 seconds or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think I'll find my niche, but yeah, struggling with it. I mean, a few years ago, I had a job to photograph a few people that were going on Love Island.
Yeah.
And they wanted to obviously have a career beyond Love Island, which did not pan out. And I found a way to enjoy that couple of days. So I guess I could probably find a way to enjoy street photography in London. But like, I'm finding myself like so excited about going to Washington and going to New York. And now we're planning Chicago that like now it's like, do you want to go to London? I'm like,
yeah. So what is it that you're going to be doing street photography in those places?
Yes.
Is that what you're going for?
Yeah. Yeah. So for the last 2 years, I've gone to New York on my own.
Yeah.
And it's like a cleansing thing. I'm away from weddings. I'm away from portraits. I can walk around with a camera. I can kind of fall in love with taking pictures.
Yeah.
But there's no plan. There's no format. I tend to do the same thing in New York, which is you go to Chinatown, you go across the Manhattan Bridge, walk down through Dumbo, come back over the Brooklyn Bridge. That's a wicked loop because you get loads to photograph in that time. The Manhattan Bridge is amazing as well because you get a better view and literally nobody knows it's there, because everyone's just drawn straight to the Brooklyn Bridge. So you're on your own.
Yeah.
And thankfully loads of criminals have gone through before you and cut holes in fences and stuff. So you can just,
part of the service.
Very, very kind of them. Washington's like we've never been. So it's more to kind of sightsee, but I want to do some street while we're there. But
don't you think if you took the time to, if you took a weekend or 5 days or whatever and went to London every day, which you could do from here.
Yeah.
As as a break from weddings, if you went with that mindset, I think you'd get it.
I think so. I'm one thing I'm definitely looking at is to find people that do it. And like you were saying earlier, how you went along with people and they show you somewhere you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of looking for is a way to
we should go out.
Well, I'm married, but
well, so am I.
I'm not going to lie, I'm flattered. But yeah, no, I'd love to. It's just something I think would help where, you know, if you want to get good at something, it's usually good to be around someone that's good at doing it.
Sure.
You just kind of trying to learn to cook in your kitchen with just a bunch of ingredients and no clue.
Yeah.
You usually just start a fire.
Ask the questions.
It doesn't often come up with masterpieces. So we're pretty much there, but I want to make sure everyone can find you. So what are you on Instagram, websites?
I'm Instagram at Huey Raw.
Yep.
HUEYRAW.
Yep.
And my website is www.hughrawson.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming down and doing this.
Absolutely.
And
pleasure.
for dressing up.
Thanks for having me.